Hi friends, it's Victor Costa, and welcome to the Daily Lift. I hope you're having an outstanding day, and I hope today's podcast makes it even better for you. Today we talk about the dignity in our jobs, and whether that job is getting rid of refuse, garbage, whether it's a plumber, whether it's a executive, whether it's a bus driver, someone who builds homes, someone who just cleans homes. It doesn't really matter. This podcast is about taking pride in your job, whatever that is. And it isn't because of the perception that other people will have of you, having that dignity. It's the perception that you have of yourself. Now, most of us don't feel bad about the job that we have. We only feel bad about the job we have when we compare it to other people. And I know exactly what that feels like. I've been in that role and in that predicament. And maybe you've had a pretty decent day, regular day, you do your job, and then suddenly you're on the web and you read about someone who is extremely successful, seems to be portraying the life that you'd like to have, and suddenly you feel like crap. You simply attack the easiest thing possible, and you start with the woulda, shoulda, couldas, and you start talking about your job. And some people feel that they are better than their job. And a lot of people are in terms of their intelligence. Sometimes we end up in positions that don't necessarily actively require all of the intelligence that we have at any given moment to execute. But sometimes people choose those jobs for a particular reason. I remember my dad when my dad was a blue-collar worker for all intents and purposes. He was a prince in my view, but he was a blue-collar worker, and he did wear a blue collar every day. And I remember my dad got a promotion, and he came home, and he said, "Boy, I'm going to have to get some ties and some shirts," because he had been working in that role for so long. It was something that he was going to have to sort of redress for. And he came home, and we were all excited for him in his new role. It was seemingly a safer job. It was a better job. It was, I suppose, a higher paying job at the time. I don't know if you factor in all the overtime he used to work and throw that in there. But I remember seeing my dad in that role and then thinking about, well, how proud he must be from working his way from the bottom to this. Wow, a shirt and tie, from that uniform that he was wearing. And I remember over the next couple of days, I remember my dad staying up late at home. He was taking his work home with him, and he was sitting there at the kitchen table with his white shirt and his tie. And that tie resembled a noose around his neck. He looked so uncomfortable and so out of his element, and he seemingly had a more dignified position. My dad began picking up garbage on the railroad tracks and worked his way up, and he seemingly had a really, really nice position. He went to school in the evenings and seemed to have a nice course for himself. But I remember taking a look at him sitting at that table with that tie that resembled a noose around his neck and the discomfort. And he was a bigger guy, and it really did look like a noose. And he was unhappy, and he wasn't with the guys that he was originally working with. And he was seemingly out on a limb and by himself. And although the job was perceptually more dignified, he might be able to show up at my school and talk about his job with a different sense of himself, it wasn't what he probably originally thought that life would be. And my dad did his job with dignity. And whatever job he was doing, he was trying to do the best at it, no matter what it was. And so that is a really great thing, that even when we are more qualified for the job we have, but we still do our best anyway, because that's the kind of person we are. We take pride in the work that we do. And if you have a job that you think that you're involved in, that you feel is beneath you, I want you to try to find the redemptive qualities about that job. And I want you to think about doing that job, even if it is, quote unquote, beneath your skill level, doing it the best way you possibly can. Let's talk about what would happen if you were performing a job below your skill level and did it the worst way possible. Wouldn't it be perceived as though look how bright this person is, yet they can't do a simple job. Rather than, boy, this person is extremely bright. They've taken on maybe some of the dirtier jobs, and they've done that with dignity. They've done it to the best of their possible ability. That opens the door for personal pride as well as promotion, as well as just feeling better about yourself. There's no way that you can begrudgingly be good at something. And there's no way that you can begrudgingly get out of a job that you dislike by doing it poorly. So let's just think about the job that we have and finding the dignity within ourselves and then doing the job. The dignity doesn't come from the job. The dignity isn't just coming from a feeling from within and then doing the job well as a result. You are not your job. You are not any of that. You're not your wealth. You're not the car you drive. You're not the house you live in, right? You are all these elements that are essential. So let's try to find the dignity in just being a person, right? And then doing whatever task is in front of us to the best of our ability, okay? And not demeaning ourselves in any way, shape, or form if we have a job that we consider to be below our skill level, or a job that is, quote unquote, lower on the socioeconomic scale. They're all necessary, every one of them. It's how we live our lives. And I remember a friend of mine telling me that he was in an airport in another country, and there was a person waiting on him, and it was just a little, it wasn't a fancy first-class lounge or anything. It was just a little place, probably like a food court in an airport. And the person that was chose to work there and wait on him was someone who was doing their job as if they were working at a Michelin star restaurant, or something fancy or something remarkable. And it was just the person, and the person elevated this person's service, the way that they were conducting themselves, the way that they were dressed, the way that they were speaking, elevated the entire room, elevated the entire business. What an invaluable person or a employee to have working there. And so this is the experience that they gave a friend of mine thousands of miles away, who traveled with that experience to tell me here in the United States, traveled from Italy to tell me that. And that person's dignity carried across an ocean. So let's try to find the dignity in ourselves and then just do the job with that elevated sense of dignity about ourselves, no matter what that job is. So I hope today's podcast brought you something to enjoy. All the best in good health. Victor Costa signing off for the Daily Lift.